I'm Kelly O'Donnell. At the end of a historically volatile day of trading on Wall Street, it has been a wild ride with huge swings in both directions after stocks plummeted last week. The Dow alone experienced a 2,600-point swing today, its biggest ever, finally ending the day down more than 300 points. The S&P 500 at one point today hit what traders call a bear market, down 20% off recent highs. This is a time lapse of trading today, as investors seem to be hanging on every word and every tea leaf from the president and the White House, with tariffs at levels not seen in 100-plus years about to go into effect, and conflicting messages about potential off-ramps, negotiations, or even more tariffs.
The market dips and the White House struggles to keep control. What happened in just one day to cause such a collapse? In a single chaotic day, over 700 points vanished from the Dow Jones as the financial markets reacted with a sharp decline. The 47th president brought up the idea of a third term, and what was meant to be a press conference to reassure the public turned into a complete disaster, broadcast to a global audience. As the pressure mounted, the White House had no choice but to respond. An outdoor press conference was scheduled that same day, intended to signal control and assure the public that everything was under control. But it only sparked a new crisis. When asked about the administration's response to the ongoing economic struggles, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt resorted to her usual defense, a harsh rebuke of the media and criticism of unnamed political opponents. But then, a reporter dropped a bombshell question. Would the president consider running for a third term? Leavitt's response, "You guys keep asking about a third term, and then when the president answers candidly, you all freak out," was meant to downplay the speculation. She added, "The president has 4 years ahead, there's a lot of work left to do, and he's doing an amazing job." But rather than calming the growing concerns, her words only fueled further uncertainty. An administration that should represent the law now seemed to be sidestepping it, and more troublingly, they didn't outright reject the idea of a third term. With the legal boundaries in question, the American public began asking themselves, if constitutional limits are being ignored, where will this power grab end? As the press conference dragged on, the pressure didn't let up. Journalists pressed Leavitt on other pressing issues, including a promised investigation into a national security breach. On March 14th, the markets felt the tremors of a financial earthquake. Newly released reports painted a grim picture. Inflation was still high, consumer confidence was plummeting, and all major economic indicators were in free fall. The Dow Jones dropped over 720 points, the S&P 500 fell more than 113, and the Nasdaq plummeted nearly 500 points, the biggest drop in months. But what truly shocked the public wasn't just the data, it was the poll that followed. Fox News, usually in support of the administration, revealed a poll showing that 56% of Americans disapproved of how President Trump and his cabinet were handling the economy, and only 43% believed the White House was fulfilling its responsibilities. But even as the president's national security team stood by him, the administration failed to provide any concrete plans to address the urgent needs of the American people. Instead of policy adjustments that could restore confidence, like interest rate cuts, small business relief, or tax suspensions, the White House offered vague statements and ceremonial gestures. Meanwhile, a bigger political shift was brewing. In the span of just 1 week, more than 50% of voters at a town hall in Indiana staged a silent walkout in protest.
Hundreds of thousands of people hitting the streets this weekend, protesting the Trump administration's actions on government downsizing, the economy, and other issues. Organizers are calling the demonstrations the hands-off rallies. Protesters gathered in Washington, Boston, Philadelphia, and other cities across the country, holding signs with slogans such as "Hands off our Social Security." In response to the protests, the White House press secretary reiterated Trump's promise to protect federal health programs such as Medicare and Medicaid. And those handoff protests continuing across Michiana today. Here is video from a protest in St. Joseph, Michigan, where groups gathered on Main Street and Lake Boulevard. And in South Bend, here is a video sent in by a viewer showing protesters lining up along Indiana 933, marching and holding signs for people driving by to see. The march began by the Inn at St. Mary's and ended near Angela Boulevard. and another hands-off demonstration in Goshen. More than 100 people gathering outside the Elkhart County Courthouse. The organizer says the nationwide protests are to send a message to the current administration.
There is a lot of organizing going on, trying to stop the efforts by Elon Musk to slash crucial programs that have been pillars of our democracy and pillars of our society for decades.
The hands-off demonstrations were organized for more than 1,200 locations across the nation.
A controversial comment from the state's lieutenant governor sparked outrage, leading to online backlash. New polling data showed that 62% of Americans now believe the federal government was heading in the wrong direction. These weren't just isolated incidents. They were signs of a deeper shift in the political landscape, one that could signal the beginning of a major realignment. In Indiana, a town hall meeting led by Republican Representative Victoria Spartz became a stage for public dissent. Hundreds of voters from both sides of the political spectrum stood together in protest. A video from the event showed the crowd chanting, "Do your job." The protest was a response to proposed cuts to public programs like Social Security, healthcare, and education, policies that many fear will leave working-class Americans even more vulnerable. Under increasing pressure, Representative Spartz struggled to respond to critical questions, and by the end of the event, more than half of the audience walked out in silent protest. Critics dubbed this the Dogecoin plan, referring to a sweeping policy supposedly crafted by Trump and quietly supported by Elon Musk. On the surface, the plan promised to reduce government waste and increase efficiency. But behind the scenes, it aimed to dismantle entire federal agencies, including the Department of Education, and cut funding for programs like Medicare and Social Security. Things only got worse with a statement from Virginia's Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Earl Sears, who during a private meeting reportedly said, "If you've never had a job, what do you have to fight for?" This sparked an immediate backlash, particularly among federal workers facing layoffs due to proposed cuts. Sears' words resonated deeply and soon ignited widespread outrage. In Maine, a local self-organized town hall became a powerful symbol of discontent when a lone empty chair was placed in the center of the room. The chair symbolized Republican Senator Susan Collins' absence at the meeting, and the haunting question of where was she when the country needed her echoed throughout the event. The image of the empty chair quickly went viral, furthering the growing sense of abandonment felt by many Americans. As Republican town halls grew more chaotic, Democratic meetings seemed to offer a different tone. Representative Robert Garcia, for example, was met with strong support at his town hall, where attendees praised his commitment to defending Medicare, Social Security, and rejecting privatization of government services. This contrast underscored a widening gap in public expectations, highlighting a deeper ideological divide within the American political landscape. From Indiana to Maine, it's clear that the American political scene is shifting, but the question remains, are these just fleeting moments of frustration or the beginning of a major political transformation? Meanwhile, the tariffs introduced by Trump continued to reverberate through the economy. The Nasdaq fell 2%, the S&P 500 dropped 1%, and GM stock plummeted 5% following Trump's announcement of a 25% tariff on imported cars and pharmaceuticals. The move aimed to correct decades of unfair trade, but it also faced fierce backlash. Trump's insistence that the market would self-correct seemed disconnected from the reality facing everyday Americans. Car prices were set to rise, hurting consumers, and pharmaceuticals, largely produced in China and Ireland, would see price hikes, exacerbating an already precarious economic situation. What's more concerning is the absence of a clear plan to address these issues. Trump's promise to bring pharmaceutical production back to the U.S. was vague, leaving the American people with no solid solution. Meanwhile, his tariff policies continue to stoke instability both within the U.S. and across the globe, with shifting tariffs on countries like China, Canada, and Mexico, creating a volatile and unpredictable economic environment.
They were getting yippy, they were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents, they wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but Somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it for a short period of time, but we made $2 billion. We're making now $2 billion a day. Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate. So we'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to work out amazing. I think that our country is going to be at the end of a year or shorter, but I think we're going to have something that nobody would have dreamt possible.
Ultimately, the U.S. economy is showing signs of a potential recession, with negative growth projections. While Trump insists his policies will turn things around, the reality is that Americans are facing rising costs and mounting financial uncertainty. Will Trump's tariff policy help the U.S. economy, or will it deepen the instability? But before we dive into the next stage of this video, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments and like and subscribe, because what might happen next will be mind-blowing. Stay tuned. Is the U.S. economy on the brink of recession, or just a risky gamble at the expense of the people?
We're getting some signs from key economic indicators. News Nation's Alicia Nieves is here with more on the state of the U.S. economy. I know you were at the New York Stock Exchange all week long. Let's start with the U.S. dollar. Is it taking a hit?
It is. So this is the U.S. dollar index. This matches the U.S. dollars, compares it to about 6 other currencies. Right now, we saw it drop to its lowest level in about 3 years. This is really concerning. You have it down 8% now for the full year so far. And this is concerning because analysts are scratching their heads, really trying to understand the last time we saw something like this. It's been more than a half a century. The dollar is considered a safe asset. When people pull out of risky assets like the stock market, they go into cash, they go into bonds. And so we saw that not happening. And this is something that has a lot of analysts, a lot of investors concerned, because it means our investors here domestically and abroad pulling out of the U.S. more broadly amid the growing tension and concern and uncertainty with the Trump administration and these tariffs. And right now, that seems like this is an indicator of that.
I want to ask you about bond markets as yields increase. Typically, the average American isn't talking about bond markets in their everyday conversation. That's changing. Why, Alicia?
So we started paying attention to the bond market on Wednesday. We saw a spike in the bond market yields. Typically up means good, but when it comes to bonds, when yields go up, the actual value of the bond goes down. Bonds, again, are another safe haven asset. If they're pulling out of the stock market, they should be going into the bond market. That is unusually not happening right now. And again, it continues to make investors worried that there's a loss of faith happening in U.S. asset classes more broadly here.
The latest consumer sentiment numbers are out, reaching its lowest level since 2022. What are these numbers telling you?
These numbers are really concerning in that, down 11% month over month, 3 straight months where we've seen consumer sentiment pull back, 30% year over year pullback in consumer sentiment. There's even a read in this consumer sentiment report that shows inflation. Consumers are expecting inflation to spike over 6% now, based on the tariffs that are being put in place. Even the ones that have been pulled back. What this means is consumers are probably going to stop spending. If you're worried that you might lose your job, that prices are going to go up, that the economy is in a bad position, you're going to try to hold your money as long as you can. That leads to a potential consumer spending pullback and a recession. You have the wisest minds on Wall Street have been saying that. Jamie Dimon, Bill Ackman, the billionaire hedge fund manager, even Larry Fink coming out and saying we might already be in a recession. Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, saying that because typically for a recession, that means 2 contracting or negative quarters of GDP. We could be in a recession and not even know it. Typically, we don't know it until about 6 months in. If there's a ray of sunshine, it comes from Jerome Powell, who's not often the cheeriest person.
Right.
But he has said, listen, we have seen in the past consumer sentiment come down negative, but consumers still spending. So it's not 100% shot that we're in a recession or that we could be leading into a recession, but all the red flag indicators are going up.
All right, great breakdown there. Thank you, Alicia Nieves.
Prepared to face the unpredictable fallout of these decisions? Jon Stewart and Josh Johnson have humorously mocked Trump's erratic tariff policies. But the real question is, do these decisions actually strengthen the U.S. economy, or are they just creating more chaos and uncertainty? We'll take in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs and make our country so strong and so rich, it will never be richer, Trump once boldly claimed. Tariffs, in his words, were the weapon to knock down other countries and fill America's coffers. But soon after Trump imposed tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico, the reality didn't match the promises. The stock market plummeted, unemployment rates spiked, and consumer spending took a hit. Then, the word recession started creeping into the financial news. So, what's the truth? Will these tariff policies deliver long-term benefits, or are we heading into a future of uncertainty? Tariffs are delayed, then they're on again. They're off one day and back the next. Trump's constant changes to tariff policies have left everyone in the dark. At first, he imposed tariffs on goods from major trading partners like Canada and Mexico, claiming it was the only way to make America strong again. But as the market faltered, Trump unexpectedly paused the tariffs, leaving businesses and the public in confusion. Can a government continue making sweeping policy changes without truly understanding the long-term consequences? How can businesses plan their futures when policies seem to change on a whim? The real danger here is that this instability only worsens the U.S. economy, and that's what Americans are most worried about. These tariffs are necessary, Trump said. I've talked to the president, and I can tell you his intentions are clear. But then there was a sudden twist in the narrative. Tariffs are off. Well, maybe not, but the trade deficit will be higher anyway. Trump's flip-flopping only fuels the chaos. In the midst of this, Jon Stewart sarcastically pointed out, prices are rising. Oh, it's not inflation, it's just that everything's getting more expensive. But if prices are soaring and it's not inflation, what is it really? The American people are now faced with more uncertainty, as Trump's policies seem driven by impulse. Just after midnight, in a moment that felt more like a teenager's breakup post than a presidential statement, Trump tweeted threats against the EU and Canada. If they team up, I'll slap them with killer tariffs. The message wasn't a formal speech or an official policy. It was a late-night Twitter rant. Was this a strategic move, or was it a sign of a man losing control? The next day, the consequences came fast. Trump's late-night threats sparked backlash from America's oldest allies. Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, once seen as a Trump ally, flipped, saying, "We'll make sure the U.S. feels the pain. I'm sorry for the American people, but this is on Trump." France, the UK, and the entire European Union quickly followed suit, forming a new trade alliance with Canada. Without the U.S., Trump, who had once hosted the party, was now locked outside the living room. You know, in global politics, there's just no room for these kinds of 2 a.m. tantrums. One impulsive tweet, said in the wrong tone, and suddenly, you risk losing alliances that took decades to build. While Trump continues to pick fights with old friends, the American economy, well, it suffers. Consumer confidence has now dropped to its lowest point in 15 years. Rent is climbing higher and higher, and wages, they just can't keep up with the relentless rise of inflation. Everyday Americans, they're feeling it, the weight of these rising living costs. A Bloomberg analyst summed it up perfectly. Americans don't care who yells the loudest, they care about who makes life a little easier. He went on to say, "Make America great again. All we see is make recession real fast." From America, first to America alone, Trump's once popular slogan is now starting to feel like a slogan for isolation. Major U.S. companies like Tesla, Apple, and GM are quietly moving production lines to Canada and the EU to avoid the risks of sudden, unpredictable U.S. policy changes. In just 48 hours after Trump's tariff threats, stock prices for key manufacturers dropped. Investors clearly got the message. Political chaos is not a stable business model.
Street, where the closing bell rang just moments ago as investors react to President Donald Trump's new 25% tariffs on auto imports. So the Dow landing in the red. Ford fell more than 3%. General Motors fell more than 6%. So let's take a look at our interactive stock market heat map. This is brought to us by FinViz. So it shows the top 500 stocks. All of this right now is in real time. So the red obviously indicating the stock is down. Green means it is up, and the size of the box that represents the market cap. So the 25% auto tariffs target imported cars, including passenger vehicles and light trucks, as well as imported parts, including engines, transmissions, powertrain parts, and electrical components. And keep in mind, one vehicle component may cross the U.S.-Mexico and U.S.-Canada borders up to 8 times before reaching final assembly, according to eMarketer.
True leadership isn't about loud boasts, it's about earning trust. In a world full of uncertainty, what businesses and countries need most is stability. But if a nation keeps changing its policies, threatening its partners, and shaking confidence in the market, no matter how grand the rhetoric, guests at the party will start leaving. Allies need consistency, investors need stability, and the American people need clear answers for tomorrow, not midnight promises written in the dark. If someone wakes up at 2 a.m. to issue threats, we have to ask, are they really in control, or is the situation controlling them? For more insights on the happenings in the political world and globally, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to our channel.